My name is Jared. I'm one of the team members with Podcast Movement. I appreciate everybody's patience. We are very fortunate today to have Lauren Passell of Tink Media, and today's topic is Grow Your Show with CrossPromos. Real quick, just want to let everybody have a quick reminder about speaker submissions if you're interested in speaking at our next event, which is Evolutions. That'll be in March in LA. You can go to evolutions.podcastmovement.com. I'm going to put that link in the chat. But in the meantime, welcome, Lauren. We're so glad you're here. We're talking about growing our shows with cross promos. Everybody that's a podcaster wants to grow their show. So this is a timely topic, as always, and we appreciate you being here. And now I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you. Maybe you can share a little bit about yourself for people that are not already familiar with what you're doing and what Tink Media is doing.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to get to talk about one of my favorite things, which is cross promos for podcasts and podcast marketing. A little bit about me. I started my company, Tink Media, because I have a background in book publishing, and I originally wanted the company to help authors get on podcasts to promote their books because I didn't think that we were really publishing houses were like meeting podcasts in the right way. And I love podcasts and I worked in publishing. But the more I started working with podcasters, the more I started realizing that they needed marketing help. So I've kind of changed the company to, fit the needs of what my clients need. So I will help shows grow in any way possible. And that's going to be one of my favorite ways to do that is cross promos, which is what I'm going to talk about today. But we do a lot of other things, helping with ad spends, or we help with content. We help book guests. Like I had a client who said that they wanted Snooki on their show, and we found Snooki. Like our clients are really, we just respond to what our clients want. But a lot of the times it's these promo swaps that really end up working, and they feel so good and they're so fun. And that's why I love talking about them. I also have a podcast newsletter called Podcast the Newsletter. And if you go to podcastthenewsletter.com, you can subscribe. It's all recommendations. You're not going to learn anything about tech or the industry. But I also have a podcast, a newsletter called Podcast Marketing Magic. And that's brand new and a way to get all my tips on a weekly basis. And that's at podcastmarketingmagic at substack.com. So yeah, we're sharing my screen. Cool. So I did make it a deck that I thought I'd share with you. And first, I want to talk about the different kinds of cross promos. There is the promo swap, which I know that you have heard of before when you're listening to podcasts. It's just when you're listening to a show and you hear the host say, hey, if you like this show, you might also like this show. And just a very, straightforward swap. And I'm going to get into them a little bit more later because I really want you to leave this with like so much enthusiasm to do these on your own. And I'm going to teach you exactly what to do to get started on your first promo swap. There's also feed swaps, which means that an entire episode of one show is inserted into the feed of another show and vice versa. So it's like if you're subscribed to You're Wrong About and you did a feed swap with the show American Hysteria, you would be listening to You're Wrong About and suddenly see an episode from American Hysteria. So that's an entire episode. And these really, really work. But you want to be really careful about how often you use them because you don't want to alienate your audience. You don't want to have an entire feed of other people's shows. But they really, really work. So be very choosy about who you decide to do a feed swap with. There's also crossover episodes. I love seeing these. It's when someone, two shows will come together. The hosts will come together to do some special content, and then it can go on both feeds. And maybe each host can kind of introduce it on their own feeds in their own unique way. But this is a really, really great way to partner with another show. And that's what these cross promotions are all about. thinking of the most unique, fun, out of the box partnerships that you can think of. They don't all have to be out of the box, but those are my favorites. So the crossover episodes are great because, you're kind of saying to your audience, you're giving the other show a huge thumbs up, and your listeners are getting to hear you talk in conversation with the host of another show. So it's a great way. It's a great way to get audiences onto your show. I am a huge fan of newsletter swaps. I have my own podcast recommendations newsletter, and I'll give you a few more ideas of newsletters that you can, be reaching out to. But if you can't get a promo swap to work, if you can't get a feed swap to work, if you can't get anything else to work, it's pretty easy, low stakes thing to do a swap in your newsletters or on social media. So that's just exchanging some copy and exchanging some images and agreeing to do. So I would say any show that you feel like there is some, overlap, plan a social media, a newsletter swap, and then see where it goes from there. Maybe if it does really well, you can explore something else. This is a great way to test and start. But another thing I will get into, and one reason I love cross promos, promo swaps, and feed swaps, social media doesn't get you new listeners. It's not going to increase your audience. Social media is great for the audience you already have. It's wonderful for your listeners to be able to find you on social media if they want to tag you or share something from you or ask you a question. But it's good for the community you already have. But generally, people don't click to download a podcast from social media, but they do in newsletters. And that's why I really, really, really want to stress newsletters. And by the way, it's also a reason you should be pitching your show to newsletters like mine, but there's a lot of other ones out there because people do click those links and they're really valuable ways that people learn about new shows. Like guest swap. I love guest swaps. And as I mentioned before, that was the whole intent of Tink when I started it. I wanted to get my clients on podcasts to talk about their books. And it's the same thing. Reaching out to a podcast that you like and, offering yourself as a guest on their show and hopefully offering them as a guest on your show, maybe if that works. That's great. If you don't have guests on your show, maybe you can offer something else. And you can maybe sweeten the deal with a newsletter or social media promotion or something like that. But being guests on another show is a great way to get new listeners because they really get to know you. The more time you can spend with them, the more time they're going to like you. And so they're more likely to come over to your show. And thinking about just sweetening the deal, this is a lot of negotiation too. You have to, you're sharpening your negotiation skills and really constantly thinking about what do I have that other people will want? Do I have a big newsletter audience? Do I have a great social media presence? Do I have an event where I can invite other podcast hosts on to be speakers? Really think about what you have in your toolbox that you can offer other people. I am working one of my clients right now on a show that's pretty new, so it doesn't have tons of downloads. So when I reach out, because it's so new, so when I reach out to a potential partner and I can't always offer tons of downloads because we're so new, but they have a very large Twitter following. So I'll say, hey, we'll do a tweet, and that usually seals the deal. So when you're thinking about who to partner with, I don't want you to just think about the size, like it's the perfect size, because you might be able to offer something else. And also when you're thinking about who to reach out to partner with, I would say go big. I've had a few times I've reached out for a show much bigger than my client's show. And the other show has agreed to do the cross promotion because they want to, and they think that my client's show is valuable content for their listeners. So sometimes you can do that. So I'm going to get into this in a second, but make sure that you're coming up with a variety of shows to pitch yourself to, a variety of shows you want to partner with, small, medium, large. And like I mentioned, there's, panels and events. There's all sorts of different kinds of promos, content exchanges from blogs, etc. And I want to put an emphasis on the etc. And I'll get to that soon. They work. Oh gosh, they work so much. It makes me so happy. They feel like personal recommendations. If your friend texted you and said, I want you to listen to this episode of Family Secrets, you're probably going to listen to it. And these, especially host-read cross ad swaps, really, really work. So I'm going to get into the terminology in a second. Usually they're free. The best ones are free. I guess I have heard of people, paying for things, but that's more advertising. So it's free. And that's great, especially for small indie shows who really need free tools that work. And this is a free tool that works. Maybe my favorite part is that when you do a cross promo with someone and you partner with someone, you immediately are becoming this contributor within the podcast community. And I love my job, and I get up every day because I love the podcast community. And so these exchanges are actually really positive and fun. It's like you're making new friends but also helping each other. Another great thing about them is I'm going to teach you how to write a letter to begin your partnership. And that's basically called a pitch letter. So, you're sending this letter to a bunch of shows you want to work with and producers and hosts. And even if pretend nothing happens of these letters, pretend you don't secure a swap or anything, just pretend that doesn't usually happen. You've already done something by hitting send on the email for your pitch letter, because by sending it to people, you're increasing awareness. They might, check it out later, go download it, even if they don't respond to you. I think that these cross promos make podcasts better. I think they're valuable content. You're helping make the other podcast better. You're helping making your podcast be better, and you're giving your audience something really valuable. And actually, I really want to quickly I just thought of a little test you can give yourself if you're ready to start thinking about cross promos for yourself, or maybe you're already doing them. But I always tell people when they hear them on podcasts, sometimes it's natural for us to want to glaze over them. Like when you're listening to a podcast you love and a promo comes on, you might zone out for a second, check your email. I think you need to start listening really, really closely to those. Listen and ask yourself, is this a good audience match? Do I want to listen to this show that they're promoting? Does this work? Do I think this works with other people? Also, think about the language. Is the language well done, or is it lazy? Is it specific? Is it funny? Think about, listen really, really closely to the promos that you hear on other shows. So I'm still trying to prepare you to do your first one, or maybe you've done a few, but we'll talk about some of the language. Dynamic ad insertion means that that's when you hear a podcast host say, hey, we'll be right back. We've got, some words from our sponsor or whatever. Dynamic ad insertion means that the ad can be inserted dynamically into the episode. So it's almost like it can be taken in and out and placed anywhere in the episode. So a team, your hosting service can help you. I think it's becoming increasingly important to have the capability to do dynamic ad insertion. People are starting to get really creative with it, and that is another topic. But it's good to have, and if you have it and you're not using it, I would start using it. So that means that you can drop promo or an ad into your episode and then take it out whenever you want. So you can say, take it out after it reaches 10,000 downloads. So you can be really specific with how many people are going to hear that ad. And you do have to know that when it's counting those ads, when you say, when it hits 10,000 downloads, that doesn't mean 10,000 people have listened to it. That means it was downloaded on devices 10,000 times, which can be great, but just keep that in mind. Now, if you don't have dynamic ad insertion, you will do it baked in, which means that promo or the ad is going to be in the episode as naturally and solidly as anything else you say. So if I was doing a podcast episode right now, and then I would say, oh, real quick, I wanted to tell you about Polar Seltzer because it's my favorite and the best flavor is orange vanilla. And let's start talking about the content again. It's going to live in the episode forever. So that it can be a little challenging, not impossible. If you want to partner with someone or swap with someone who does dynamic, if you do baked in or vice versa, but it's not impossible. If you do baked in and you're going to do a promo, just think about approximately how many people are going to hear this. If you get 5,000 downloads an episode, then, keep that in mind when you're working with the person who does dynamic, and they can shut off the ads once it reaches the number you've agreed on is a good number. I always advise, if you're doing baked in ads, think about the approximate number you get in 1 week or 2 weeks. What's that number? That's a great number to swap with someone. And so the dynamic people can respond and turn off the ads once it reaches that number. There's also host read versus digital. I'm sure you understand what these are. The host read means you get it read to you by the host. And I think they're more effective than digital, which means a digital ad is inserted and it's often read by the host of the show being advertised. I would advise you to be ready for both. I recommend host if you can, but be ready for both. And to do that, have a 30-second audio ready to go of yourself promoting your show. Just have it ready. Then if someone needs it, you can send it to them. And also, I would have 2 versions of copy to work with when you are sending someone the copy you want them to read on the show. So that's if it's host read and you're giving the host copy to read, I would say give direct copy if you want, and then tell them that they can edit it, highlight words that are crucial to the reading. So if if it's very, very important that your podcast tagline is in that reading, bold it, make sure that they know that. Also, if there's any names or words that are difficult to pronounce, you must put those in there. But what I like even better is giving them talking points instead of direct copy. Because if you give them talking points, they're going to be forced to read it in their own voice. So I would actually start with the talking points. And then if they ask for direct copy, you'll have it and you can send it to them. But I really think that talking points is the best way to get a more natural, believable read for your show. A big part about these promos is you have to find your friends. And that's what's so fun about this. So the very first thing that I do when I get a campaign is I sit down and I get cozy and I look up my show on Apple Podcasts. It's the very first thing I do, because when you look up on Apple Podcasts, you're going to see like people also listen to, or people also liked, I forget what it says, but they're going to give you some recommendations there. Open a Google Doc a sheet and start taking notes on all of those podcasts that are recommended. And then if you find one that's really, really great, tap that and see what shows are recommended from that show. So you're starting to build a list with Apple Podcasts alone. I also love Listen Notes and Podchaser, um, and Player FM. Listen Notes, if you have the premium account, you can get access to emails. You get a couple extra features. I have the premium account for Listen Notes and I really love it. It's just basically like Wikipedia for podcasts. You can search themes, specific episodes, keywords. And actually, there is a way to find the address if you don't have the premium account. I guess I'm not going to share that right now, but if you'd like to know, let me know. But I would get the premium account for Listen Notes. But Podchaser is also great. You can get email addresses there. It works like a database, like a PR database. And Player FM, this is going to seem so tacky, but sometimes I just type Google Player FM and then the topic of my show, and it will surface all of these lists that tons and tons of recommendations. So these are how you can start to find the shows you want to work with. And then I have to shout out Raphonic, and okay, so I show my clients Raphonic all the time. And it's this website that will tell you kind of which shows are in your neighborhood, which shows you might want to work with in the galaxy of podcasts, which ones are nearby. But it has like a 3D way of showing you. And I have so much fun looking at Raphonic. And sometimes when I tell my clients about it, if they don't act excited enough, I get really sad. I'm like, why are you not more excited about this? So all that to say, I just hope that you get really excited about this. So this is Raphonic. I'm going to type in, you're wrong about, it's going to pop up. Look at that. Okay. So then you can zoom in, you can see all the shows that are similar to You're Wrong About. And this is based on data from Apple Podcasts. You can swivel around, you can select a show, learn all about it. Then you can go to that show on the graph. Oh my gosh, look at this. I could do this all day. I'm not joking. Okay, so there's also a lot of newsletters that I think you could find similar shows. The Bellow Collective, and by the way, you pitch yourself to these shows. Bellow Collective, Earbuds, Podcast the Newsletter is my podcast, Inside Podcasting, Hot Pod. Hurt Your Brain is all about like smart thinky podcasts. So that's a great option if that's what kind of show you have. You can find shows to swap there. Podcast Gumbo and my other podcast newsletter, Podcast Marketing Magic. I'm literally putting swap opportunities in Podcast Marketing Magic. So I've already been setting people up. So all I ask in this newsletter, they subscribe and they say to me, this is my show, I want to swap, and I'm matching them up on the back end. When you think about your friends and what kind of friends you want to make, think about the listeners that you don't already have but want, not just the ones you don't have yet. And for example, I have a client right now that I love. It's a show called How to Do the Pot, and it's all about cannabis for women. And the first thing that might pop into your mind is to look at cannabis shows, but that's not who I was trying to reach. I think a lot of I'm going to reach out to cannabis shows, but I think that what's more interesting is the kind of women that I think might be interested in cannabis. So, reaching out to shows like The Cut or Bodies, or, thinking really, really creatively. If you have a true crime show, don't just reach out to other true crime shows. Think about what else is this show and think about your listener. And that's why at the bottom of this, I say, make listener profiles. Think really hard about who your ideal listener is. What else do they like? Do they like horoscopes? Do they like cooking? Because those can be really, really valuable partners. And another tip is before you reach out, I would make sure if you are on social media, on all the platforms, give them a follow on social media, because it will kind of prove first, first of all, when they see your email, they'll remember who you are, but it'll also just prove that you are kind of a follower of them before you reach out and ask something of them. And also, on the topic of asking, remember that these are partnerships. So an email shouldn't be just asking for something. You need to be offering something as well, and be very, very clear about that. It's give and take. The other thing I would say is value your niche audiences, even if it's small. I would much rather have a tiny, very engaged audience than a humongous, unengaged audience. You know, the more niche you can get, the better. I had a client that was a huge sports star, and I actually, she really wanted to be on some larger shows that were about more like political and stuff like that. And we were able to do that, and it was fine. But what really moved the needle was actually much smaller sports podcasts, because those listeners were tuned into what she was saying. It was their total jam. So value your niche audiences. There's some rules when you're making friends. Please don't email without having listened to the show. Sometimes people pitch me their show to be in my newsletter when they haven't read a single issue or clicked on a single issue. And I think it's offensive. You're respecting someone's art. So make sure that you have listened to the show, and prove that you've listened in the letter. When you're reaching out in this letter, that the first sentence, I think, should be, I loved your episode on this. It made me think about this, Keep it short, shorter than you even think it should be. People are going to feel overwhelmed if they see too much text, and rely on bullet points if you can. And I think a few things that are helpful when writing in the letter is, you could give some copy for them to use if they're going to be writing about your show. So a very, very brief description, and also a link to something that is available for them to hear. I don't advise that you reach out to them before there is a trailer, at least. I think when people receive an email, they are going to forget about it if they don't have something to listen to immediately. So keep it short, use bullets, give them something to listen to, and make your ask really clear, be kind, and prove you've listened. Also, when you're looking for these friends, I told you how to go find them on Apple Podcasts, but you can't just add them to the list. You have to do a little bit of research into each one. Listen to an episode, make sure the podcast is still running. And I have a rule for myself where if it hasn't published an episode in 8 months, that doesn't mean I'm not going to reach out to them. I'll reach out to them and say, hey, I love your show, but I noticed you haven't put out an episode recently. What are you up to? Maybe they are coming back, or maybe they started a newsletter instead of the podcast. Maybe they have something else, another way for you to work with them. It's just good to check in. But if it's been less than 8 months, go ahead. I would say if it's been 3 years, maybe you can skip, because 3 years in podcast time is 300 years. Don't send a selfish letter, as I said before. And it's always great to ask questions. Ask questions. What are you up to? What do you have coming up? People love talking about their podcasts. Here's a nice letter I received for my newsletter, and I just wanted to show it to you. And it hit all the points. There's something for me to listen to. It was polite, a very simple ask, a very brief write-up, and they mentioned my newsletter. And I've kept this forever, and I look to it often. So let's really quickly review, and then you might have some questions, I think. Find your friends, make a list of your friends and who you want to work with. Write a template letter but then make each one unique. So email all of your friends, but make each email a little bit unique. If something works, you can go back again. So if, first of all, if one show really, really works, go back to step one where you are, finding if you like this show, you might also like this show. If you end up partnering with You're Wrong About and it like works really well, think about what other shows are similar to You're Wrong About. And then if something works in 6 months, go back and do another promo. Or maybe if a promo works, you can go back and do a cross promotion or, a feed drop, something else, nurture the relationships that are working. And finally, I just have to say this because I'm not an organized person. Stay organized. I can't tell you how many times I've known that I'm doing a swap with a show, but I have forgotten to write down the email address or something like that. Get a Google Doc, get super, super duper organized. And you can contact me at lauren@tinkmedia.co. I have podcast newsletter, podcast marketing magic, and Tink is my company. I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay, we do have some questions, Lauren. So I guess we'll start with one here. This is from Rabia. Which link should you send people? Like newsletter? I have my website, then of course Apple, Spotify.
I always think you should send the link that's going to get them to the listen as soon as possible. So I often in my newsletter, I like to include the link to the websites. So it's always good to have. So if you're pitching me, I would send the newsletter, the website link at the bottom, but the very first link should be the Apple Podcast link or something like that, or Spotify. I would say one of those two. I think Apple maybe. I would say go with Apple because you want the least number of steps for them to get to your show.
Okay. And this is more of a comment, but I'm probably too niche. The history of women's soccer. What would you say to that, Lauren?
The history of women's soccer. I mean, I don't think anybody's too niche to do these. Just think about what it sounds like. Someone who's interested in the history of women's soccer might like a lot of feminist shows or shows that highlight other women's stories or other sports shows. I think that would be a really fun challenge for yourself to go in and make a list. Or there's a lot of kind of like You're Wrong About. This almost reminds me, I keep on talking about You're Wrong About because everyone knows it, but like I'm sure there's a lot of things that people are wrong, misconceptions people have about women's soccer. So really think about your content, look at your episodes, see what keywords you're using. Another way you could do this is I think that every podcaster should do you just heard Juleka Letico Williams say this, a listener survey after 1 year. So if you've had your podcast around for 1 year, you should do a survey. And this would be a great way for you, if you have a podcast on the history of women's soccer, do a survey for all your listeners and find out what else do they listen to? What other shows do they listen to? What else do they like to think and talk about? You can learn a lot about them by just asking them.
Okay, I think this might be an inside joke or something, but Sherry says, "What about the Nazis?" So,
Hi, Mom. That's my mom.
That's your mom. Okay.
Mom, I just mean you don't want to partner with Nazis. Mom, you taught me that. That's the golden rule.
Okay, fair enough. All right, over to the next question, which is, what if someone reaches out that isn't a good fit for cross promotion and aren't really taking no for an answer? Is it okay to ask them to stop reaching out completely?
Oh my gosh, yes, that sounds like borderline harassment. Yeah, if it's this is your show, your art. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. I would say just I mean, I don't know how much they're emailing you, but I think you can say it very politely. Just say, I love your show. Maybe someday in the future, if you want to be kind, because who knows, maybe someday in the future, you don't want to burn any bridges, but you can say right now, I'm not interested. I'm not doing this right now. Absolutely.
Okay. And another question that popped up is in your initial discussion of various types of promo, you had at the end panels, events, content exchanges, etc. People wanted, so one person wanted to know if you could elaborate on some of those.
Oh, sure. I mean, I didn't really talk about this, and I think it's important. The letter that you send, that I kind of taught you how to send, think of it as like an open door. you're kind of saying to the other show, hi, I like your show and I like my show and I think they should be friends. So let's set up a play date. And you're, maybe suggesting a promo swap, but I don't just ask for a promo swap because there's so many other things that can happen if you keep an open door policy. So, and ask questions. So think open-minded and ask questions because I told you to ask questions in these letters. One time I was asking someone what they have coming up. What do you have on, for the rest of the year? And they said they had an event coming up and they were looking for panelists. And I got my client as a panelist on this event. So that's what I mean about, if, people are starting to do a lot more podcast events now. Also, people have Patreons. So maybe you could offer something for their Patreon. People are always looking for Patreon content. So by asking the question about what they have going on, they might have Patreon events, something else going on that you might be able to contribute to.
That's good advice. We have lots of love here. People are saying thanks, and we've got you got some fans. You got, of course, Ariel saying "Go LP." So that's always fun. I don't see any more questions in the chat at this moment. So I think right now we'll just give everybody a chance to figure out what's the best way. You mentioned your email address. Is there any other way that you want people to reach out? You said lauren@tinkmedia.co.
Yes.
Is your email.
And yeah, I love hearing from people. I love getting pitches for my newsletter. And then I love it when people reach out to me on Twitter. And so I'm at Lauren Passell, and it's LaurenPassell.
And that's on Twitter. I'll put that in the chat as well. That's at Lauren. I'm typing this. Okay, so we got that out to everybody there. Great. Well, Lauren, we really appreciate everything. Queen's Podcast is so helpful. Rabia says, wash hands. Okay. All right. So, a lot of fun comments here. But I think the bottom line is people are grateful that you have taken the time to share this really helpful insight. This is not intuitive to certainly not most new podcasters. So this is great advice. And we really appreciate your time today, Lauren. And hope
Thank you for having me.
Check out your newsletters and Tink Media.
Hopefully I get to talk to some of you. Thank you. And thanks, Mom and Ariel.
Yeah. All right. Thanks again, Lauren.
Bye.
Bye.